Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our next digital business innovation discussion explores how certain critical enterprise functions provide unique vantage points from which to derive and act on new breeds of intelligence. These classic functions like procurement and supply chain management are proving catalysts for new value as businesses seek better ways to make sense of all of their data and to build more intelligent enterprises. Here to help us explore how businesses can best operate internally and also across extended business networks to extract insights and accelerate and inform a much broader company decision-making process is Barry Padgett. He's president of SAP Ariba. Welcome to BriefingsDirect, Barry.
Thanks for having me.
We're delighted to have you with us. Barry, businesses, of course, want to make more sense of this ocean of data that they create and encounter, perhaps even to automate more of what will make them increasingly intelligent. So why are these core processes like procurement, spend management, and supply chain management sort of newly advantageous when it comes to making businesses transform, become more modern?
Sure. Well, I think we've had a really great run over the last several years in terms of bringing intelligence and bringing modernization to the front end of our businesses, right? Focusing on that customer experience, that customer engagement, and really linking our business activities directly to the customer and creating transparency. And I feel like now we're seeing this, sea change in terms of putting the magnifying glass on some of the traditional kind of back-end examples. And so in particular, when we think about, an intelligent enterprise, connecting to the front-end customer is super important, but also now we see a real demand for a connected supply chain. And I think, part of that reason is when you look at some of the statistics out there, I think, depending on the industry and depending on the geography, about 60 to 70% of the value of any company is in their supply chain. It's in the stuff that they procure, either to buy the materials to ultimately produce the goods that they sell, or it's in procuring, the services and the people to deliver the ultimate end customer service that they provide. And so there's this opportunity now to link 60 to 70% of the value of the company to the intelligent enterprise and really start to drive lots of efficiency, lots of modernization, and really start to see some huge business benefits.
So we're really seeing the potential now for complete end-to-end visibility and therefore the opportunity to act in new ways. And it seems like becoming an intelligent enterprise, gaining that holistic view, must become a core competency for companies. They seem to be heading in that direction. So how does SAP Ariba specifically help companies gain this capability? I understand you have apps, you have networks, you have data, but there's more to it. There seems to be like a need for almost cultural change, behavioral change. How do you at SAP Ariba help foster that?
Yeah, for sure. When we think about connected supply chains and collaboration across our different business units at the companies that we all represent, it's super important that we think about scale. And so one of the things that SAP Ariba has focused on over the last couple of decades is really building scale as relates to the supply chain and the supplier networks. And just to give you some sense of the size there, currently we have about 3.5 million suppliers transacting on the Ariba network. And the volume that they put across that network every year is about $2.1 trillion US dollars. And to put that into context, if you add up all of the volume globally going through Alibaba, eBay, and Amazon combined, it's a little over 800 billion. And so that Ariba network is generating, almost 3 times now the size of those other 3 platforms combined. And so when we think about just the sheer volume of events and transactions and insights available to us now on a network that size, we can really combine it with, cloud-based apps, as you mentioned, combining it with some of the SAP capabilities in their new S/4HANA core, and you can start to unlock some real value. And so it's really delivering this intelligence around context and processes as relates to everything from sourcing to managing your vendors and their contracts, managing risk, and ultimately driving tons of cost savings, efficiency, and transparency through to those suppliers.
So it's really a set of attributes that companies can't really refuse to start taking advantage of. If, of course, their competitors do it better than they do, there's some real efficiency and innovation that can take place. Let's step back and take a look at some of the trends that are making this a unique time for this concept of intelligent enterprise capabilities. What is it in your mind that makes this the opportune time for companies to think about themselves, with an emphasis on being more intelligent?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think we're kind of in this third wave of sort of intelligence. In so much as I think the first wave was everyone recognizing, all these analogies that we had, like data is the new currency, data is the new oil, big data. We had this, unbelievable excitement around being able to unlock and get visibility into these massive repositories of data that sit around our businesses and around the applications that we use at our businesses. Then I think we had this kind of second wave, which was the realization that this huge amount of data, this vast set of attributes that we had to go and gain intelligence from was maybe a little bit more challenging than first met the eye in terms of how we get access to it. Some of it was structured, some of it was unstructured, some of it was in one database, another was in a different database, and so we started creating data lakes and data warehouses. And I think even now we're in this kind of third wave, which is even recognizing that we finally have the data together in some sort of consumable format. We really need outcomes. And so we're looking to our vendors that we use and the application suites that we use at our companies to help us to drive outcomes. And so it's less about show me all the data, and it's less about help me get my arms around the data, and it's more around how can we use some of these latest technologies that we keep hearing about, artificial intelligence, neural networks, machine learning, blockchain, and start to actually drive business outcomes. And so in some ways, I would say we're kind of getting fatigued, around the actual words themselves, big data, AI, ML, and now we're really starting to drive towards more of the business outcomes. And I would liken it to, any kind of new technology that comes along, we get very excited about it, but then ultimately we start talking about what impact it can have for our business. And so whether that was the initial, first wave of moves to the cloud that we did and taking advantage of things like HTML or .NET in the early days, we talked a lot about the technology. And now that sort of cloud transformation is fairly mature and robust, we really don't talk about the technology beneath it anymore. And now we talk about the advantages that cloud offers our business in terms of, actionable insights and real-time data and some of the cost benefits. And so I think we're seeing that same kind of maturation cycle now as relates to the intelligent enterprise and certainly the data that powers it.
Right. And so the concept of more people taking advantage of this intelligence in their actual work processes, it seems that where SAP Ariba is for the procurement professional, for those that are evaluating supply chains, bringing that intelligence perhaps even invisibly into their applications, into their workflow is the next great step. So what is required now for enterprises to be able to take advantage of this when it comes to integrating intelligence into their business processes?
Yeah, I would say, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's less about integration now, and it's more about collaboration. And so I think in terms of, where we're seeing our customers drive real benefits across their organizations, it's when we're, truly collaborating across the business. And so that's certainly system to system, so both with other SAP assets as well as, non-SAP assets in a real heterogeneous, sort of environment with our customers. But it's also engaging the various business units, the various organizations, and we're seeing this move from, procurement and from, the chief procurement officer at a lot of companies to becoming much more of the hub of collaboration. And so, we like to say that our CPOs are now becoming our CCOs. They're becoming the chief collaboration officer. Because with this sort of transformation that we're seeing across supply chain and procurement, we're really seeing an opportunity to come bring in every component of our business and start to have a dialogue around where we can drive value. And so whether that's, in the marketing team or the sales team or the operations team or whatever it happens to be, we end up procuring a lot of services and a lot of goods. And so driving and mirroring and sort of adhering what it is that we're actually procuring, whether that's people, services, or goods, to the actual outcome we're looking to drive, whether that's customer adoption and retention, whether that's innovation, whether that's a core mission that we have at our company around purpose and ethical, supply chains and business practices. It really all comes back to this kind of central hub of how are we spending our money, who are we spending it with, and how can we leverage it better and do more with it.
In order to empower that chief procurement officer to become more the collaboration officer, an avalanche of data isn't going to do it. Out of context intelligence isn't going to do it. What is it that SAP Ariba, I think, can uniquely bring that allows for a contextual injection, if you will, of the right intelligence at the right time that can empower these people but not overwhelm them? What is it that you can do under the covers that helps them be so powerful at the right place and the right time?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's transparency. Right? There's a very good chance that a lot of our prospects and certainly a lot of your listeners potentially actually won't be able to put their finger on exactly what they spend, who they spend it with, and whether or not it's actually aligned to what the outcomes are they're trying to drive at their company. And so some of that is kind of the first line defense of let's look at our suppliers and, are we completely and fully automated with those suppliers so that we can transact with them electronically and cut out a lot of the manual process and some of the errors and redundancy that exists at our organizations. There's some cost savings there. For sure, there's some risk management. And then when we go a step deeper, it's, listen, how do we make sure that the suppliers that we're doing business with are who they say they are, do support the kind of attributes and characteristics that we want within our suppliers? And then as we go a little bit deeper, let's look at the suppliers of those suppliers. And so as we go 2, 3, 4, 5 rungs deep in the supply chain, we can really now start to make sure that we're sort of marrying, if you like, the money that we're spending with the outcomes we're trying to drive as our company. And so that's what Ariba does, not only on the supply side, make it easy for suppliers to do business with their customers, but also for our buy-side customers, the procurement customers, it's to make sure that they are getting transparency into everything from their contracts, make sure that they're administering and managing those contracts effectively, and then also ensuring that as they do business with their various suppliers, that they're able to performance manage those suppliers, they're able to take risk out of their business, and they're ultimately able to, again, really link the dollars or the euros they spend as a company with the core mission and purpose that they have, whether that's ensuring that they have the right kind of environmental sustainability and impact, whether they're looking to drive forced labor and eradicate slave labor out of their supply chains, or they're simply just trying to ensure that they have a diverse supplier base and that they are empowering, minority and female-owned businesses or LGBT businesses. There's really an opportunity there, but it all comes back to that very first point I made around first you got to create the transparency, and then you can go unleash some of the opportunity and innovation that you seek after you've got the transparency.
Right, great. So as we look to the outcomes that are possible when you can combine these cultural changes, attributes, the powerful tools and insights from an organization like SAP Ariba, let's go to some examples or use cases. I recently saw some information about a digital manufacturing capability using both the Ariba network as well as SAP services. Maybe this is a good example of bringing more intelligence and showing that collaboration across an entire manufacturing ecosystem and even a start to finish process. So let's dive into a couple of examples, and maybe starting with manufacturing to illustrate the intelligence but also that end-to-end collaboration benefit.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the best manufacturing networks out there is the SAP manufacturing network. It's connected to the Ariba network. So there's around 30,000 discrete suppliers connected to that network, specifically focused on manufacturing. And again, when you open up this kind of collaborative community on a network, we can start to do really neat things. And so an example would be, let's say you're trying to create a new product, or you want something, a new piece or part manufactured. With this kind of collaborative network, you can do something like throw up a 3D drawing, collaborate in real time with whatever subset of those 30,000 discrete suppliers you want, and start to drive innovations that you wouldn't have been able to do on your own. So in some ways, it's kind of how do you how do you harness the creative genius that exists outside of the four walls of your business when you're trying to embark on some of these new projects. And so having a network available to you that's operating in real time starts to change the paradigm and change the way you think about innovation at your company. So you can find vendors very quickly. You get to manage those vendors in completely new ways. You can collaborate in real time, which allows you to do more in less time. And I think it really provides an edge in terms of when you think about competitive differentiation. This is no longer, how do we make our back end more efficient, and it's more about how do we drive competitive differentiation in our industry, and it's being able to go quickly, to be agile, and to do things, particularly in the manufacturing network, that you haven't been able to do before, like linking sensors on a factory floor to the supply chain in real time and to your warehouses across the globe. So I think there's a lot of really great examples in all the industries, but manufacturing has some particular opportunities given that we're making such a quantum leap from how we used to do things to the kind of new paradigm of an intelligent enterprise.
Yeah, and it strikes me that the manufacturing capabilities and efficiencies also shines a light on why having a mission-critical network is important, because you're dealing with intellectual property. You're dealing with drawings of products that haven't been released yet. You're sharing intense secrets across this continuum. But if you don't do that in a secure way with reliability and compliance built in, then you could certainly run into trouble. So maybe we could just take a brief pause and take a look at why having this in the right network that is built for compliance and security is important.
Exactly. I think one of the things that you mentioned there that I really like was this idea of mission critical. And so I think a lot of what we would think of traditionally as kind of back of the house process around procurement may have been looked at as business critical. We need it, but not maybe mission critical. Meaning if it doesn't happen right now, we're not gonna die. But when we start talking about some of these concepts that we're speaking about today, particular things like this manufacturing network and using some of the intelligence available to us now to, for example, use IoT, right, with the machines that are on our factory floors, and when there's a requirement for a part update, or there's a piece of maintenance, or there's a failure that's either happening or about to happen, and we're able to link that immediately in real time to our supply chains and to our suppliers and our warehouses around the world, we can potentially keep those machines up and running much more efficiently without any downtime, which again drives towards competitive differentiation, drives towards top-line revenue achievement for the company, and ultimately is a really good example of the difference between business critical and mission critical.
Thank you, Barry. Moving on now, we've talked about sort of buyers and sellers, and that might be an oversimplification these days. More and more we have companies that are putting together solutions and value chains that include third parties and new services, and the better integrated they are, the best outcomes can be expected. So how does this intelligent enterprise and intelligent networks and business processes that you're all creating and energizing with analysis and data, how does that help engender a richer ecosystem of partners and alliances? How do those third parties become an accelerant, or maybe even a force multiplier, if you will, in terms of how businesses can react to their markets?
Yeah, I think the whole paradigm around a network fundamentally has a requirement that all the parties are participating and that there's value for all parties. Otherwise, it falls apart, right? And it doesn't work. If it's too heavily buy-side focused, you don't have suppliers there. And if you don't, if it's too heavy supply side, then you don't attract the buyers. And so it's a flywheel, and it all has to be in balance, meaning that everybody's winning. And so I think when you look at the intelligent enterprise, it has to extend to both those sellers as well as the buyers. And in particular, we're talking a lot about some of the buy-side kind of application procurement side examples. But the cool thing is that in these networks, that sellers can use the same technologies. They get to analyze data from millions of sources. They get 360-degree view of buyers, right, of their health, and they get to get embedded into their demand chain, not just the supply chain, right? So being able to work with your buyers and get fundamentally more visibility and transparency into their planning cycles, into their buy cycles, and ultimately be able to either anticipate or see in real time the kind of demand that your customer is having allows you to be a better supplier. allows you to plan and ensure that you can meet their requirements and hopefully exceed them. And that's new. That's not the kind of collaboration that's existed in the past. And so this absolutely is a very evenly weighted, balanced scorecard in terms of making sure buyers and sellers all see value and see a reason to participate. Some other examples would be, the seller getting simple things like a change in payment status, right? Getting updates as to the decline in sales or changes in leaderships or pricing fluctuations around commodities or supply, and being able to look at those in real time and cross-reference them not only with things they've done in the past, but also maybe what's happening in the marketplace overall. So there's a lot of value here, and being able to tap into these opportunities is super important. And I think lastly, just in terms of why would suppliers want to participate? Would they see this as a tax? Is this just something else that we're asking suppliers to do in order to get our business? And I would argue that, in particular, looking at the 3.5 million suppliers that are active on the Ariba network, they really see the opportunity for new business and for discovery, right? They're joining these networks because there's not only an opportunity to service their existing customers in a better and more modern way, but also there's an opportunity to go attract new customers. And so, again, it speaks to that collaboration, and it speaks to the discovery process that's available to buyers so they can go out and source a really diverse and rich set of suppliers for their community.
It also seems exciting that as these procurement professionals elevate themselves to a more strategic level, making more impact on the businesses, that the intelligence that they're dealing with can itself become marketable, that rather than procurement and some of these business functions being seen as cost centers, you can begin to monetize and add value to the intelligence either internally or even out into the community. So is this also, are we at a pivot point where the notion of cost center and value center need to be reevaluated? Can we think about intelligence as something that we can sell, that we can market?
Yeah, I would say, that's certainly the ambition, and that's the goal, and that's the aspiration. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, listen, the best business case that an organization is going to be able to come up with in terms of driving some savings within their organization is going to be the procurement business case. And so we're still finding, that there's a ton of digital transformation projects happening right around the world that are led with a procurement project. You'll start with modernizing and creating intelligence in your supply chain and in your procurement process, and then that in turn, the savings that come out of those projects, which are material, somewhere in the 4 to 8% of whatever a company spends in total, is usually the driving force that helps to fund then the rest of the digital transformation. So certainly there's this opportunity between cost and value center, but I think we should just acknowledge that the thing that gets this off the ground, the discussion actually funded and moving, is the fact that there's still just a ton of efficiency and process opportunity and cost savings that exists in procurement. And so that's kind of table stakes and the blocking and tackling of getting started. But I think once you get started, I think your question is right on. Like now, once we've saved a huge amount of money and we've optimized some of the process and transparency in our business, now what can we do to extend that and create more value for our organization and more differentiation on the basis that we now have a ton of tools and a lot of transparency available to us? So I think it's a great question.
Yeah, no, I think, as you say, you reach the efficiency benefits, but then there's a whole new avenue of dividends to collect on in terms of how to market and monetize. All right, we're almost out of time, Barry, but before we sign off, let's look to the future a little bit. There's still more to come, of course, in terms of what the technologies can provide. A lot of talk about that alphabet soup of AI and ML and blockchain. But let's look a little bit more practical, but in the future, what sort of pipeline projects have you been teasing in the marketplace? You've had a lot of different Ariba Lives, and we had Sapphire not too long ago. What should people be thinking about products that will be coming soon that will enable some of this intelligence to become more practical?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's certainly some existing products out there that we've just launched recently, like Ariba's supplier risk capability, which allows our customers to go in and evaluate their supply chain and look for areas where they have risk or exposure, and whether that's utilizing our data and the customer's data or third parties that are connected to the Ariba network like Verisk Maplecroft or EcoVadis, who basically look and deliver insights into environmental and sustainability risk factors, or another third party that's connected to the network like Made in a Free World. They basically score and detect forced labor in your supply chains. So there's a bunch of really interesting opportunities there in terms of managing risk. And then there's some, more sort of, I would say, meat and potatoes kind of opportunities where we're partnering with IBM and utilizing their Watson capabilities, or indeed the SAP Leonardo intelligence suite to do things like drive smarter contracts, build out more powerful intelligence capabilities within the ecosystem. And so that could be simple things like making sure we don't have duplicate payments across our businesses, or looking at the hundreds or potentially thousands of contracts that we manage in our organizations, and ensuring that we're applying intelligence to ensure that if there are clauses or risk factors that are being activated, that we're being notified proactively. And so you could think of something as simple as maybe there's an exchange rate clause, for example, in some of the contracts that we manage, where there's some action that's required or a threshold that activates a different clause in our contracts. And so we can't expect thousands of contracts that we manage for a contract manager to remember all of those. And since they're all usually in different formats and archived in different locations, we can use intelligence to really start, again, driving efficiency, managing risk, and ultimately contributing to the bottom line, which helps us to then reinvest those bottom line savings into some top line initiatives.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored BriefingsDirect discussion on how enterprise functions are providing a unique vantage point from which to derive and act on new breeds of intelligence. And we've learned how such business functions as procurement and supply chain management are providing newfound well springs from which to extract these insights and to accelerate and inform much broader company decision-making. So a big thank you to our guest. We've been here with Barry Padgett. He's president of SAP Ariba. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks so much.
And a big thank you to our audience as well for joining this BriefingsDirect Modern Digital Business Innovation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host throughout this series of SAP Ariba-sponsored BriefingsDirect discussions. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.